Have you ever noticed that instead of starting something new, you go back to that same show again? The one where you already know every twist, every joke, every line that's about to land. Maybe you even skip to your favorite episode like you're revisiting an old friend rather than watching a piece of entertainment. Most people think it's laziness or lack of curiosity. But what if it's actually your brain trying to protect you? There's a psychological reason people rewatch TV shows and movies, and it has less to do with boredom and more to do with emotional regulation. When life feels unpredictable, your nervous system quietly looks for something stable, something it already understands. Research on cognitive fluency shows that the brain prefers information it can process easily, and familiar stories require less mental effort. You're not just watching a show again, you're lowering your cognitive load. And when anxiety is high, that reduction feels like relief. There's also something called uncertainty reduction theory, which explains why humans are wired to feel stress when outcomes are unclear. A new series is full of unknowns. Will you like it? Will it disappoint you? Will it demand emotional energy you don't have tonight? But a show you've already seen makes no such demands. You already survived the sad episode. You already know the character doesn't really die. Your body can relax. It's similar to why children ask for the same bedtime story over and over. Predictability equals safety. But there's another layer people don't talk about. Rewatching often connects to attachment. The characters become psychologically familiar, almost like distant friends whose personalities don't change. In attachment theory, consistent figures create a sense of security. Fictional characters can serve that role in a subtle way. You know how they'll react, you know their humor, you know their flaws. And in a world where real relationships are messy and unpredictable, that consistency feels grounding. Some studies even suggest nostalgia increases feelings of social connectedness and meaning in life. So when you rewatch something from 5 or 10 years ago, you're not just revisiting a plot. You're revisiting a version of yourself, who you were when you first watched it, what you felt back then, what you believed about the world. It's almost like emotional time travel, but safer. And maybe that's the point. Maybe rewatching isn't about escaping reality. Maybe it's about stabilizing it. We tend to judge ourselves for not always chasing novelty. But novelty requires energy. And sometimes, after a long day of uncertainty, your brain doesn't want stimulation. It wants reassurance. It wants something that says, you've been here before and you were okay. So the next time you press play on something you've already memorized, pause for a second. Ask yourself what your mind might actually need in that moment. Because chances are, it's not mindless repetition, it's self-soothing in disguise. But there's another layer to this habit, and it's a little more intimate than comfort. Sometimes you're not rewatching just to relax, you're rewatching to feel something specific again. You already know which episode will make you laugh in exactly the way you need. You already know which scene will break you just enough to release what you've been holding in all day. It's almost surgical. Psychologists talk about mood management theory, the idea that we select media based on the emotional state we want to maintain or change. Rewatching gives you precision. A new story is unpredictable emotionally. It might be too heavy, too flat, too chaotic, but the familiar one is calibrated. You know where the relief is. You know when the tension will dissolve. That predictability gives you a strange kind of emotional authorship. And then there's memory. When you revisit a show you loved years ago, you're not only consuming content, you're activating autobiographical memory networks. The couch you used to sit on, the person you watched it with, the version of you who had different fears, different dreams. Neuroscience shows that memory is reconstructive, not static. Each time you recall something, you subtly rewrite it. So when you rewatch, you're editing your past in small, almost invisible ways. You're strengthening certain emotional threads, softening others. It's quiet identity work. There's also something about control that feels almost soothing in a chaotic world. You press play knowing exactly what will happen. No surprises, no betrayal from the plot. In real life, people disappoint you. Plans collapse, outcomes shift without warning. But this story won't. This story stays loyal. And loyalty, even fictional loyalty, regulates the nervous system. Some researchers link familiar media consumption to lower stress responses because the brain doesn't need to stay hypervigilant. You're not scanning for threats in the storyline, you're resting inside it. That matters more than we admit. Of course, there's a fine line. If rewatching becomes the only way you cope, it can slowly shrink your tolerance for uncertainty. Growth requires friction. New narratives stretch your empathy. They confront your assumptions. They make you sit with ambiguity instead of resolving it neatly in 40 minutes. So yes, familiarity can become a cocoon. But here's the part people misunderstand. Choosing the cocoon temporarily is not regression, it's regulation. You don't build resilience by overwhelming your system every day. You build it by oscillating between challenge and safety, between expansion and return. Rewatching can be that return, a psychological exhale. And maybe that's why so many people feel slightly embarrassed about it. Because our culture worships novelty, new releases, new goals, new versions of yourself, always forward, always upgrading. But human beings aren't software. We are cyclical. We revisit, we repeat, we rehearse. And sometimes repetition is integration. When you rewatch a story after years have passed, you notice different things. You empathize with the character you once judged. You understand the parent instead of the child. You see nuance where you once saw simplicity. The story didn't change, you did. And that's the quiet beauty of it. Rewatching becomes a measuring tool for your own growth, a mirror that shows you how your interpretations evolve. So maybe the question isn't why you go back to the same shows. Maybe the real question is what they represent. Safety, memory, control, identity. Or maybe just a moment where your nervous system can unclench. The next time you instinctively choose something familiar over something new, don't rush to label it as stagnation. Ask what part of you is asking for repetition. Ask what it's trying to stabilize. Because most behaviors that look unproductive on the surface are actually adaptive underneath. You're not wasting time. You're regulating. You're remembering. You're recalibrating. And sometimes going back is exactly how you move forward.